Step back, look around, then get excited. That's the title of this video. And I promise you, by the time we're done, you're going to understand exactly why I picked those three little phrases. If you've been following gun news lately, you're probably stressed out. One week it's a new ban. The next week it's a court ruling that scares everybody. It feels like the ground is moving under your feet, and nobody seems able to tell you what it all means. You scroll through the comments, and half the people say the sky is falling, and the other half say everything is fine. So who do you trust? Here's what almost nobody is telling you. When you actually step back and look at the whole picture, the last few years have been some of the best for gun owners in a very long time. And I'm about to prove it to you, one case at a time. Quick question. Before we keep going, are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to walk you through could change how you think about your rights, your carry permit, and your gun safe. If you're not subscribed, you're missing the updates that keep you out of legal trouble. Hit that button right now. I'll wait. Okay, let's get into it. First, you need to understand why gun news feels so confusing. The reason is actually simple. There's a huge fight happening right now over what the Second Amendment really means, and both sides are winning some rounds. Most people think the Second Amendment is settled law. The truth is, it's been completely rewritten in the last few years, and that's exactly why you keep seeing scary headlines. Let me take you back to where this started, back in 2008. The Supreme Court decided a case called District of Columbia versus Heller. That case said something huge for the first time in American history. The court said the Second Amendment protects your personal right to own a gun for self-defense, not for the military, not for a militia, for you, in your own home. That was a massive moment, but here's the catch. For years after that, the courts kept saying, okay, fine, you have that right inside your house, but outside your house. The government can basically do whatever it wants. So states got creative. They made it almost impossible to carry a gun in public. They banned certain kinds of guns, and they told gun owners, sorry, that's just how it is. Here's what that looked like in real life. In some states, the law said you could carry a gun, but only if the local sheriff decided you had a good reason. That's called a may-issue system. And in practice, the answer was almost always no. You needed to be a politician, or a celebrity, or have a personal bodyguard just to get permission to protect yourself. Regular people were told to stay home and hope for the best. That was the reality for decades, and a lot of people just accepted it because they didn't know there was any other way. Then in 2022, everything changed. The Supreme Court handed down a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen, and that case set a brand new rule that changed the whole game. Here's the rule. In plain English, if the government wants to restrict your gun rights, it has to point to an actual law from American history. Not a guess, not a policy opinion, not a feeling, an actual law that existed around the time our country was founded, and that matches what the government is trying to do today. If they can't find one, the restriction is unconstitutional, period, end of story. Now here's why this matters so much. For a very long time, courts just trusted the government. If the government said a gun law was good for safety, the court said, sure, sounds good, no questions asked. The Bruen case ended that. It said, no more rubber stamps. If you want to take away a right, you have to prove it's part of our history. That one decision flipped the entire conversation. And since then, case after case has been building on it. Some of those cases have been wins, some have been losses. But the direction is clear. And that brings me to the part that genuinely shocked me. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what's coming next. I'm working on a video about the exact words to say when police ask if you're carrying a gun. 5 simple words that can protect you during a traffic stop. Words that could keep you out of handcuffs. Subscribe so you don't miss it. It might be the most important thing you hear all year. Hit that button now. Now this is where it gets interesting, because in the summer of 2026, the Supreme Court dropped a ruling that most gun owners completely missed, and it was unanimous, 9-2-0. Every single justice agreed. The case is called United States versus Hemani. Let me tell you what happened. There was a man named Ali Hemani. He was a regular user of marijuana. Now here's the tricky part. Under federal law, marijuana is still illegal, even if your state says it's fine. And there's a federal law that says if you use an illegal drug, you cannot own a gun. So the government charged him with a crime. Their argument was simple. You used a drug the federal government doesn't like, so you lose your gun rights. But the Supreme Court looked at that law and said, no, you cannot strip someone's Second Amendment rights just because they use a substance. The federal government disapproves of 9-2-0. That's not a close call. That's a statement. Let me break this down for you because this matters way more than people realize. For decades, the government has used drug laws to quietly take away gun rights. If you used marijuana, even in a state where it was completely legal, you were breaking federal law the second you touched a gun. Millions of people were living under that threat without even knowing it. Think about that. A person in Colorado or California doing something totally legal in their own state could become a federal criminal just for owning a gun. The Hemani case just pulled the rug out from under that whole approach. Now, I'm not telling you to go break any laws, and I'm not telling you how to feel about marijuana. That's your call, and I respect it either way, but here's what I am telling you: the government can no longer use your personal choices to automatically erase your constitutional rights. That's a massive shift, and almost nobody is talking about it. This ruling affects way more people than just marijuana users, because it sends a message to the government. Your rights don't disappear just because the government disapproves of something. You do, and that's a message that protects every gun owner in this country. Have you ever stopped to think about how many other rights could be erased the same way? That's the real question this case answers. And here's the part that makes it even bigger. The court didn't just rule for one man, it ruled on a principle. It said the government can't use a blanket rule to strip rights from a whole group of people just because of something they do in their private life. That principle reaches far beyond marijuana. It touches the way the government thinks about your rights in general, and that's why lawyers on both sides are still unpacking this decision. It's going to be cited in courtrooms for years. This is one of those rulings where you remember exactly where you were when you heard about it. Now let me tell you about the second big ruling, because this one is about carrying your gun in public, and it's the one that really made me sit up straight. The case is called Wolford versus Lopez. It came down in June of 2026, and the Supreme Court ruled 6-3. Here's what it was about. The state of Hawaii had a rule that basically said you can't carry a gun in public unless the government decides to let you, and in practice, the government almost never said yes. So for most people, carrying a gun in Hawaii was impossible. Even though the law on paper said it was allowed, the Supreme Court looked at that and said, that's not how this works. If the Second Amendment protects your right to carry, then the state can't just refuse to hand out permits to almost everyone. That's a no-carry rule wearing a disguise, and they struck it down. Here's a hypothetical example to make this crystal clear. Imagine you apply for a carry permit in a state like that. You pass the background check, you take the class, you do everything right, and then the state looks at your application and says, sorry, we're not giving you a permit. We just don't think you need to carry. That's not a law. That's a veto. And the Supreme Court just said the government doesn't get to veto your rights. Now, I want to be clear about something. This ruling does not mean every state has to hand out permits like candy. States can still have real rules. Background checks, training, reasonable standards that everyone has to meet, but they can't set up a system where the answer is no for everyone, no matter what you do. That's the difference between a real law and a rubber stamp that says denied. Here's the part that's interesting. Hawaii was the last state in the country with this kind of setup, and for years, gun owners there had basically no way to carry in public. Now, thanks to this ruling, that's changing, and it's not just about Hawaii, it's about the principle. The right to carry is a real right, and the courts are finally treating it like one. Imagine being a law-abiding citizen in Hawaii, doing everything right, and still being told you can't protect yourself and your family on the street. That was the reality for decades, and it just changed. If you live in a state that already lets you carry, this ruling matters to you too, because it locks in the idea that carry permits have to be given out fairly, not handed out like favors. But wait, there's something even more important, because while the Supreme Court was making those rulings, a lower court dropped a bomb that has the whole gun community buzzing. And this is where the get excited part really kicks in. In August of 2026, a federal judge in Texas ruled that big parts of a very old law called the National Firearms Act are unconstitutional. Now, I need to explain what that law is because it confuses a lot of people. The National Firearms Act, or NFA, was passed in 1934. It was created to control certain kinds of guns and accessories: silencers, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns. Under this law, you had to register these items with the government, you had to pay a tax, and you had to wait months for approval. Sometimes people waited over a year. The judge in this case, his name is Judge Hendrix, looked at all of that and said, this doesn't match our history. These are common, lawful items that millions of Americans own, and the government can't make you register them and wait forever just to exercise your rights. So he blocked the government from enforcing those registration rules. Now here's the part that's really interesting, and also the part where I have to pump the brakes, because a lot of people are going to hear this and go straight to the gun store, and I get it. I really do. It's exciting, but you need to understand what this ruling actually is. It's a decision from one federal judge in one part of the country. It's already being appealed, and appeals can take years. So this is not a green light to run out and buy a silencer and skip the paperwork. Doing that could put you in serious legal Trouble. The rule of thumb is simple. Follow the law as it stands today in your state, right? Now, and let the courts finish their work. This ruling is a huge sign of where things are heading, but it's not the finish line, it's the starting gun. And that's the thing about this moment we're in. Every one of these rulings, big and small, is a step in the same direction. The Hemani case says your rights don't vanish because of your private choices. The Wolford case says the government can't lock you out of carrying in public. The NFA ruling says old laws that don't match our history are in real trouble. Put those three together and you start to see a pattern. The courts are re-examining laws that were never seriously challenged before, and a lot of them are not surviving the test. And here's what that means for you personally. It means the laws you grew up with, the ones you were told were permanent, the ones that made you shrug and say, that's just the way it is. Those laws are now on the table. They're being questioned, they're being tested, and some of them are falling. That's not a small thing. That's a change in the weather. And when the weather changes, smart people prepare. Hey, real quick, did you know that most people who watch a video like this never hit subscribe? It's true. They watch, they learn, they leave, and then they miss the next update. Don't be that person. Join the tens of thousands of gun owners who get these legal updates first. Hit subscribe right now. It's free. It takes 2 seconds, and it keeps you informed. Okay, back to the big picture. So now you're probably thinking, wow, this all sounds great, but here's the part nobody's talking about, and it's the reason this video says step back first, because not everything is a win, and if you only look at the wins, you'll get overconfident, and overconfidence is dangerous when it comes to the law. Let me give you a real example. In 2025, the Supreme Court had a chance to take up a case about Maryland's ban on AR-15 style rifles. The case was called Snope versus Bruen, and the court said no, they refused to hear it. That means, for now, Maryland's ban stays in place, and other states with similar bans are watching closely. So if you live in a state with an assault weapons ban, nothing about that has changed. The court also turned down cases about age limits for buying handguns. So the rules about who can buy what in which state are still a patchwork. It's still messy out there. And here's the other thing to watch. The Supreme Court is about to take up a brand new case about the federal ban on felons owning guns. That's a huge one, because it could change the rules for millions of people. Arguments are expected in the fall, and whatever the court decides, it will ripple through every state in the country. So the picture is not all sunshine. It's a mix, wins in some places, losses in others, cases still pending, and that's exactly why you have to step back and look around before you get excited. Here's what most people get wrong. They think one big ruling fixes everything. It doesn't. The law moves in inches, not miles. But here's the thing. If you look at the direction of travel, it's clear. The courts are moving toward protecting your rights, not away from them. The Hemani case, the Wolford case, the NFA ruling, 10 years ago, none of that would have been possible. 5 years ago, none of that would have been possible. And that's the part that should genuinely excite you. Not because every battle is won, but because the trend is on your side for the first time in decades. Don't make the mistake of letting one loss make you think the whole fight is over, and don't make the opposite mistake either, thinking one win means you can relax forever. The truth is in the middle, and the middle is very good news. Now, quick legal note. This video is educational information, not legal advice. Laws change all the time, and they're different in every state. What's true in Texas might not be true in California. So, always consult a qualified attorney for your specific situation. Now back to it. Here's the urgency part. This information is changing fast, like really fast. The next big ruling could drop any day, and my next video is about the exact steps you need to take before that happens. If you're not subscribed, you'll miss it, and you don't want to find out about a change in the law after you've already broken it. Subscribe now. Stay ahead. So let me leave you with this. Step back and stop panicking about every headline. Look around and see the whole picture, the wins and the losses together, and then get excited, because the law is finally moving in the right direction. Your rights are worth protecting, and the best way to protect them is to stay informed, stay calm, and stay involved. That's what this channel is for, and that's why I need you to subscribe, because this fight is far from over, and the next chapter is going to be written by people who are paying attention. Be one of them. Hit subscribe now. Share this video with a gun owner who needs to hear it.